You're listening to episode 91 of the Play Therapy Community Podcast.
Welcome to Play Therapy Community Podcast, providing connection, information, and inspiration to child therapists all around the world. Here's your host, a licensed psychotherapist, a registered play therapist, and my mom, Jackie Flynn.
Hi there. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Play Therapy Community Podcast. Well, I am super excited about today's conversation with someone that's really special to me that I literally just met yesterday at the time of this recording. But before we get started, I want to talk to you just a little bit about the Neuroscience of Play Therapy Summit at the Beach. That is a summit. It is an amazing conference right in Cocoa Beach, Florida. I host it with Dora Henderson, and that summit is very experiential. We learn all about the neuroscience of play therapy. Each day of the summit, it's 3 days long. We have morning sunrise experientials, and then we have sunset experientials. Dora and I are going to be doing a drum circle on the beach, and also Dr. Janet Courtney is going to be doing a mindfulness activity at the shore. There's so many things. So if you are interested in it, visit playtherapycommunity.com and just click on the Summit tab, and you could see all about it. We have so many amazing speakers. Dr. Ileana Gill, Dr. David Crenshaw, Lisa Dion's going to be there. We have Carmen Jimenez Pride. We have Dr. Robert Jason Grant, and Dora and I are going to be doing something every day. Claire Mellonton is there. So many things. Dr. Janet Courtney. It's going to be really, really good. So we'd love to see you there. Okay, so let's jump right into today's conversation with Nicole. Nicole is someone that I'm sitting here with her right now after a long day of training, and it has been an amazing training. We're in Dr. Andrew Dobo's Integrating EMDR and Jungian course, so it's been an incredible 2 days, and today Nicole and I, we ate lunch together, and we formed a friendship. And through that friendship, we've talked about lots of our dreams and exciting things. And she shared with me a metaphor. She has lots of metaphors. She actually helped me beef up my body scan, too, the 3 states body scan. But she shared with me this bucket metaphor that's just so good. So, Nicole, before we get started, can you just introduce yourself, tell people who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Nicole Looney. I am a licensed mental health counselor and a national board certified counselor. I'm licensed in Florida and Texas. I own a private practice that I operate in Palm Beach County, Florida, and I also work for an organization called Tykes and Teens, where I oversee their quality assurance. And I'm also a mental health first aid instructor for the adult and youth curriculum. So I help coordinate those trainings in the community in order to bring awareness to mental health struggles, decrease stigma for the mental health struggles that people may be experiencing, and help to educate people on how to interact with those that might be having a mental health issue or crisis so that they can get connections to appropriate help.
So good. She's literally one of the most amazing people I've ever met.
Thanks.
Super inspirational. We're actually planning to spend some time together just bouncing ideas off of each other and just collaborating and becoming better together. Okay, so Nicole, you talked about this bucket metaphor.
Yes.
I know sometimes it's definitely true with me, but with the clients that we work with as humans, sometimes things feel like small, and that same thing can feel like large in terms of distress. And the way that you described it through this bucket metaphor was brilliant. So could you share that?
Yeah, sure. So oftentimes when I have clients that I'm working with come in, they pretty regularly will be like, I was feeling totally fine and like able to manage something so similar to this not too long ago, but now like my life's out of control, I can't manage this, and I don't understand what's wrong with me or why I can't do this. So this bucket metaphor I use to try and help normalize what they're experiencing and help them feel a little bit better about what's going on, so that they feel like they have at least some understanding and control about what they're going through right now. So the way that I describe this is, if you imagine that you have a bucket sitting in front of you, and in that bucket you have a faucet turned on above it. And this is a leaky faucet, so it's constantly dripping whether it's on or off. And those small little drops of water are going to be your everyday life stressors. So that leak is something that's, small things here and there that might cause frustration or worry or anger, something that might cause some kind of an emotional reaction. And those are usually like the small, mild, everyday things. Then you have you turn the water faucet on normally. And so that would be like not an everyday minor stressor, but a little bit of a step up to where you notice the stress, you notice what's going on, but you're not really in a crisis. So that faucet stays on for as long as that issue or time period lasts. Yeah. And then you have it where you turn the faucet on full blast, and the full blast would be if you're experiencing something that's a major stressor or a crisis. And once again, that faucet stays on for as long as the issue or the crisis is lasting. Yeah. So eventually your bucket is going to become full. And once your bucket becomes full, there's nowhere else for the water to go but over. So it doesn't matter how much space you had in your bucket before. If you let the bucket fill up with these small drops of water, the regular faucet pressure, or the full pressure of the crisis, eventually it's going to overflow. And once it starts overflowing, it just continues to overflow until there's something where you dump out your bucket or you poke a hole in your bucket. So what I tell my clients to do is use self-care and coping strategies to poke a hole in their bucket. And I tell them to do that using their toolbox. So their coping strategies, their self-care techniques are their toolbox. So you're either going to have a small toolbox that you carry with you, or one of those big ones that the mechanics have in their garages. So depending on your knowledge and comfortability with these tools and techniques is going to determine how big your toolbox is for these issues. And a lot of the times, you're not going to use the same tool for every situation. You're not going to use a hammer for something you need to screw in, or vice versa. So you want to pick the tool or the technique that's going to work best for you. And you're going to want to use that to poke a hole in your bucket. So that could be coloring, that could be going for a walk, it could be spending time with family and friends, it could be sleeping for some people. So whatever that tool or technique or grouping of tools and techniques, because sometimes you need more than one tool for a job, you use that to poke holes in your bucket and let the water drain. Now, you can poke a small hole in your bucket and say okay, well, I used this one tool and it's not working. Well, it's you only poked a small hole. That water's only going to come out so slowly. So if you have, let's say, poke a small hole because you're I'm going to use this one coping skill this one time, and you've got a little leak, but you're constantly in crisis, you're getting more water in your bucket than's able to drain, and so you're still going to overflow. So you want the coping skills or those tools to be used regularly enough to poke big enough holes in your bucket so that it's draining at least equal to, if not more than, the amount of water that's getting put into this bucket, so that you're constantly with at least a partially empty bucket and you're not overflowing. So something that you would have dealt with before where you had space in your bucket, you're going to handle very differently from now when your bucket's overflowing. So keeping all of that in mind, I tell people it's better to use these tools and these techniques for maintenance jobs and use them when you're not in crisis and your bucket's not overflowing, so that you're constantly kind of giving your bucket a tune-up and not letting it overflow. But if you only wait till you're in crisis, if you think of your faucet's broken, water's flying everywhere, and you're just trying to figure out, where's this leak coming from? How can I find the tool? What tool am I supposed to use? It's slipping out of my hand. It's going to be a lot harder to manage and maintain what's going on. But when you can leisurely work on a project and you're oh, do I want this size tool or this size tool? You're able to better implement and repair or maintain what is needed. So that's where I say the the consistency of implementation in self-care techniques and coping skills and things like that is so important. Even if you're not in crisis, even if something bad's not going on and your bucket isn't overflowing. So
yeah, that sounds so good. I'm thinking about like one of the big takeaways that I'm getting from that is don't wait until it's overflowing to try to start with the tool, because at that time it's hard to even remember where the toolbox is, much less what tool to use.
Absolutely. And if you're sitting there thinking like, my bucket's already overflowing, so it's too late for me. It's not, because one part of your coping skills could be tapping in support. Have somebody else help you poke holes in your bucket. You don't have to do this alone. And like as therapists, that's part of what we do. Sometimes I sit there with a hammer with my client saying, all right, how big we making this hole? So that you have that support in your connection. And it doesn't have to be a therapist. It could be a trusted friend or a family member, so that you have someone else there supporting you on this journey to help you. And also, it's never too late. So it may take you a little bit longer to get that bucket down with you fumbling over things if you do have to do it by yourself. But the more effort you put into doing it, a little bit at a time to chip it away and help that bucket drain, the better off you'll be, no matter how high or how overflowing your bucket is at this moment.
Oh, I love it. So the thought of always take some action, like it's never too late. And even if we don't have like the capacity to turn the faucet down, because sometimes the stressors just keep coming. Right. And we have to manage whatever's happening, maybe out of our control.
Exactly. So sometimes you can't turn off the faucet. Sometimes what's broken is broken in that moment. And eventually you're just going to need to get a plumber. But in this moment, if you can't turn it off, you make sure your tools are poking holes to keep up with whatever is being filled, so that you're working more on sustaining and maintaining yourself than dealing with whatever the crisis is that's flooding and overflowing you.
Oh, that's so good. That's good for us to use as therapists, good for us to use as just humans, and to help our clients with.
Especially nowadays when everybody's feeling so overwhelmed and flooded with everything going on in life, from like wars to COVID to inflation to possible recession. Like there's just so much societal stress, and then you also have whatever personal individual stressors that you might be going through. It's so important in this time of like just general fatigue and burnout to remind yourself that like, even though I don't feel like I have time for me, even if I don't feel like I have time to poke that hole in my bucket, doing so will give me more capacity to be able to handle everything else. And it's kind of like those oxygen masks at the airplane. You have to put the mask on yourself before you can deal with whatever else is going on around you. And so in this situation, like you have to poke those holes in your bucket if you even want to have the capacity to deal with some of those other things ongoing, no matter how overwhelming whatever you're going through may feel like.
Yeah, it's like back to the oxygen mask. Like
exactly.
If you can't breathe, you can't take care of anyone else.
Exactly.
Nicole, this has been great. Thank you so much. I super appreciate this
Not a problem. I'm so glad. Thank you for the invitation.
And I love knowing you. You are just amazing.
Yes, I will be bothering you for life.